Hey, what's the one thing that all diets have in common? They have a common enemy known as processed foods. And there's a reason for this. Let's dive in. I'm Samantha Salmon, certified integrative nutrition coach and brain health licensed trainer. And today I want to talk about how I overcame cravings for processed foods with a raw vegan lifestyle that's like not exactly directionally accurate. I'm going to go into what I actually did and how raw foods played a role in this. But first, let's start with the problem, right? Why is it that it doesn't matter what dietary trend you are following? Every dietary trend has a common enemy, and that common enemy is processed foods. What's the problem with processed foods? First of all, processed foods, it's processed, right? Basically, you make something that is no longer recognizable as the original food. The definition, because now we have processed foods and ultra processed foods. Ultra processed foods are industrially produced items that are derived from foods that are grown, right? And genetically modified crops like corn, soy, sugar. And these foods, actually corn, soy, and sugar, are subsidized by the American government. So our tax dollars go into ultra processed foods that basically is causing chronic disease issues, right? Early death. And because these foods are subsidized, they're cheap to produce, convenient to purchase and consume, and they're highly hyper palatable foods. That's what makes it so dangerous. People tend to overeat on these foods. People experience reduced symptoms of mood disorders. They lower their stress. They boost their energy. They alleviate cognitive impairment when they cut ultra processed foods out of their diet and replace it with whole nutrient dense foods. That's what we do in the raw food world, is like eat whole foods, right? With raw foods, when you follow a raw food diet or a high raw vegan diet, I should say mostly like really a raw food diet. A raw food diet, there is very little room for processed foods. You may have things like tahini, and tahini technically is a processed food. It's not an ultra processed food. But tahini is basically butter made from sesame seeds. So technically that's a processed food. Almond butter is a butter made from churning and crushing almonds. What else is there? Like maca powder, which I use. Again, maca doesn't grow like a powder, right? It was powdered, and so that's a level of processing, right? So that's not necessarily what I'm talking about, because we don't have any data that that stuff is harmful to our bodies, but we do have data on the fact that on things that are ultra processed like chips, cookies, ketchup, Diet Cokes, that type of stuff, right? Cereals. I used to love Honey Nut Cheerios, Frosted Flakes, and all that kinds of stuff. This stuff is loaded with chemicals. Ultra processed foods makes up more than half of the calories in the standard American diet. So I do my best to, I completely avoid this stuff. I stay away from breakfast cereals. They are loaded with refined sugar, and this stuff is dangerous to the body and dangerous to the brain. Because typically with processed foods, the production process strips these items of the vitamins, minerals, and fiber, right? Even like some of the cereals that I used to like that were healthier. Yes, they're healthier, and at the same time, they've been so refined that they're still causing an insulin spike. So the body is not able to metabolize it as well as it could a whole food. Because you have to understand, like, there's been so many advancements, technological advancements in the food system. Our body has not really kept pace with this. It doesn't know how to process it. It doesn't even recognize a lot of this stuff. And then these items, they have a long shelf life due to added preservatives, chemicals, artificial flavorings, sweeteners, and coloring. And they have high omega-6 fatty acids, and they're low in omega-3s. Now, what we know from that is high omega-6 is no good for the cardiovascular system, and omega-3 is helpful for the brain. So we want more omega-3 and less omega-6, right? The combination of artificial ingredients, sugar, high omega-6, to omega-3 ratio, low nutritional content. That's what makes ultra-processed food so bad, right, for the body. It's inflammatory, it's detrimental to the gut microbiome, and when you consistently eat these foods over time, which I told you, it makes up, ultra-processed food makes up like 73% of the food supply, right? This is what is the standard American diet that most people are eating. It contributes to a host of issues, not just physical like diabetes and obesity, but also mental health issues like depression and anxiety. So what are ultra-processed foods? Breakfast cereals, like I mentioned, snacks like chips, cookies, crackers, salad dressings, store-bought salad dressings, many condiments, right? Like the ketchup I mentioned, but there's so many other condiments that they have on the shelves these days. Sugar-sweetened beverages, oh my gosh, there's literally ingredients that turn into formaldehyde in the body with these sugar-sweetened beverages. Commercial frozen dinners. These all are staples of the American diet for the past few decades. Some of them are even marketed as health foods, which is just how insidious the food system and the marketing and everything. Like, people really feel like, I talked to this one woman, and of course this is not an ultra processed food, but it's not a health food, which are eggs basically. This one woman I talked to recently who said that her doctor said she has to be on eggs, which doesn't make any sense to me, but I don't really want to build a reputation in Central Florida as the food police, but I just eyebrow raise. Like, what? Not even the egg board can claim health. The FDA can't claim health for eggs because it's not a health food. This leads to high cholesterol in the body. Even if you are skinny and trying to gain weight, you feel like you're underweight. Eggs ain't it. We don't want to gain fat. You could be skinny with a lot of fat and end up with a stroke. That's not what we want. Anyway, this is what's causing poor health outcomes in our country right now. 1 in 5 Americans, and this is what makes me so sick to my stomach, 1 in 5 American children have pre-diabetes. So if 5 children, 1 of them in the group most likely has pre-diabetes. And pre-diabetes causes an increased risk of type 2 diabetes, where you can actually have limbs amputated, chronic kidney disease, which we have 2 kidneys, but we need them to survive and have quality of life, and cardiovascular disease. I watched this one interview on CBS, this young teenager, I think she was like 13, 14. And she personally took ultra-processed foods out of her diet, went into eating healthier whole foods. She got more active, and she reversed her pre-diabetes. She lost 50 pounds in that process over a year period. And the interview, they were interviewing her and her mom. Her mom was morbidly obese. You can see on the interview that she's morbidly obese, and they had a line that, like, a few days after they filmed the interview, the mom passed away by the age of 44. She had a blood clot and hypertension. That's what they said that she passed away from. Now, I could just imagine like how distraught this young woman is, like the young preteen basically, or teenager. She's like a new teenager, 13, 14, right? And she was starting to inspire her mom. Her mom had made the change like 4 months prior to the interview, and the young girl had been eating whole foods and had eliminated ultra-processed foods for a whole year. And I understand in certain situations, when you're talking about low-income communities, the decisions, the hard decisions folks are making, right, in that situation of buying whole foods, because you're now using food as medicine, which is a whole mindset shift. And the mindset shift, part of that is like the money that goes alongside, which is why I wrote the book, You Can Afford to Be Healthy, which is specifically talking to people above the poverty line. And so when you're below the poverty line, that's when I'm thinking, what is the government doing about this? And I was happy to see interviewed talking about the issues Senator Bernie Sanders. I had no idea that he was so plugged in. He's against the big fat cats, and he's already put 2 and 2 together that the FDA regulates 80% of the country's food and hasn't, and according to Bernie Sanders, hasn't done enough to protect consumers from poor health outcomes that are associated with ultra-processed foods. Of course, they haven't done enough because there's a whole system at play. There's a whole system at play here. With ultra-processed foods, you have scientists being hired, food engineers being hired to make this food ultra-palatable so that you continue to eat, but not only do you continue to buy more of their stuff, but you continue to eat more at one time. You just want more and more, and it's so refined, you're not even feeling full off of it. So you actually need more to feel satiated. As you are eating this hyper palatable food that has been dialed up with sugar, fat, and salt, which is not, I would say, that is hardly the issue. Yeah, it's the levels of sugar, fat, and salt are beyond what we could find in nature. Okay, so that is beyond, right? It's unnatural for our body. But on top of that, you have all of these chemicals that the body is foreign to the body. The body doesn't even know how to break it down, and it's causing all sorts of issues with the gut microbiome. So we're having now mental health issues. We have mental health issues, we're having obesity, we're having diabetes, we're having hormonal imbalances, we're getting cancer. What does that mean now? We need to go to the doctor to get pharmaceutical drugs, right? Big Pharma is getting paid here. So it's a whole game being run. Big Pharma finances our politicians and their campaigns so they could turn a blind eye and not actually do anything about the fact that the government subsidizes these ultra-processed foods. When you go to the market, this stuff is so cheap compared to actual whole food. And we're supposed to be in free market capitalism. That's not true. We don't have free market capitalism in all cases in America. It's like a mix. We have aspects of socialism here. We have aspects of capitalism. And when it comes to the food system, it is not, there's a lot of stuff going on that's just, it's not fair market. It's not fair market. You have unhealthy food costing actually the country tons of money, and we're losing lives. We recently had a school shooting that made national news, and I had to do some research because I was wondering about this. Every time this comes up, there's a big hullabaloo, and it's horrible. Like, I watched an interview of two young girls, sisters, and one girl, the shooter was coming to her classroom, but her mom taught her to look before she opened the door, and she saw the young man pull a gun out. So she decided not to open the door, even though the teacher was telling her to let him in. She was like, no, I see a gun. So she saved her classroom. Meanwhile, her sister, the guy came in, shot up the teacher right in front of the whole classroom. She literally watched her teacher take his last breath. And she said she was trained on how to do CPR and all that, but she couldn't even save him. And the stress of all of that, she ended up having a seizure right there. And to see our young people going through stuff like this, it is just beyond me. It's heartbreaking. At the same time, I really wish our country had the kind of passion they have against these school shootings and guns being accessible to young people as they do with the food, the ultra-processed food, the sugar-sweetened beverages, right? In the hands of our young people. It's literally in the schools being sold to kids in public school and given to kids. In some aspects being sold where they have to pay, in some aspects just given for free. According to the data, we have more deaths due to diabetes than school shootings. So I just wish that the passion, right, behind saving our children and saving our communities was in alignment with that. I just not take away the passion from getting guns out of the hands of our young people, because their brains aren't even fully developed to make sense of their feelings. And that obviously turns into a very dangerous situation for everybody. But if we were to keep that and then have that, if we've had, let's say, school shootings, we've had 50 deaths in 2022 from school shootings, and that's the latest number that I could pull. And we've had, from 2019 to now, we've had 2 million deaths from diabetes. So if 50 deaths in 2022, and wherever we are with that now for school shootings, can garner this much passion, we need to have an even more outsized passion when it comes to cleaning up our food supply. You know what I'm saying? We need everybody on board. We need our politicians to do their job and to be on the side of the community. And I think that I've never heard, because I track this stuff. I follow this stuff. I follow the politicians actually talking about food and our food system. And I've never really heard Bernie Sanders talk about this. And I'm noticing too, Bernie Sanders looks a lot lighter than when I saw him running against Elizabeth Warren in our presidential campaign some years ago. So he's probably gone on his own health journey, and maybe that's why he's turned towards, but I'm sensing by his rhetoric that it's really his constituents that are putting the pressure on him and saying this is something that's really important to them. And I think that it behooves all of us to let our politicians know, if you're going to go to the ballot to vote for whoever, don't just use your agency during the time of voting. In between time, you have politicians that are supposed to be servicing your community that either you voted for or not, but they're in the role. And so they have to be held accountable to do the thing since your tax dollars are paying them. They're supposed to be serving the community. Let them know what you care about, and we need to be holding them accountable for this type of stuff. There's an estimated 10,000 food additives that are approved for use in the United States, as opposed to only 411 in the European Union. And I wrote an email about this, because I heard the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration Commissioner, Dr. Robert Khalif is his name. He said that this is partly due to cultural differences. And I'm like, I was so annoyed by that. Like, cultural differences? What are you talking about? Like, you trying to say that people in Europe care more about their health than people in America? How, Sway? That sounds crazy to me. So you're saying people in Europe want to live and people in America just want to play Russian roulette with their lives? I don't agree. I'm sorry, I don't agree. And he's basically like, the tenets of America, we like freedom of choice. And I'm like, this is straight up gaslighting, because you don't have choice when you have things in the grocery store that are literally toxic to the human body, and nowhere on the label is it saying it's toxic. It's actually being marketed on the label as being healthy and good for us. Some of this stuff you have to be a chemist to understand and know. And if it wasn't for some very smart people and watch groups, nonprofit watch groups, raising the red flag and saying, hey, this thing isn't what you think it is. This is what's going on in the body when you eat this. Like, a lot of this stuff, we don't even know how to pronounce a lot of this stuff. You're going to tell me, when you give information to people and you give false information on the label and omit a ton of information like side effects and consequences to consuming these things, that is called choice. That's not choice. And when you are subsidizing items that actually cause disease and destruction of the body, and people who have very limited income are having to make hard choices between healthy foods and unhealthy foods that are being subsidized by the federal government, this is not a choice. That is not choice. You understand? There's no way around is their choice, right? This is just, it's crazy. The people that are most impacted by this are the people with the least resources in America. It's infuriating. And also the FDA, like, there was a period of time, I think it was like in the 90s or something, where they have this whole system of like grass generally recognized as safe. So before, they would check stuff, right? Where you can, a company, let's say you're making a food product and it has whatever ingredients, you would have to submit application or whatever to the FDA, and they would have to review before it gets on the list. But then they made it basically into an honor system where anybody with a company with any product, they can submit items and put to be added to the list as grass, generally recognized as safe, and the FDA doesn't even review it. So that's why how we ended up in a situation where we have 10,000 chemicals that have been added to our foods and generally recognized as safe, whereas the European Union, they don't even have the system. There's no such thing as grass. Everything has to get approved, has to go through rigorous review, and they've only allowed 411 to our 10,000. You can't. This is not a cultural. The cultural difference is America is pay to play. They're all about that money. They don't really care, apparently, about people's health. They care about the pockets of the big guys, the fat cats. So anyway, my whole thing is I don't want to be a victim. I watched my grandmother and the pain she went through with type 2 diabetes. I decided for myself, food is not worth it. I don't want to be a victim to the system. There's a whole game being played on people, the medical system, the pharmaceutical industry, politics, like all of it. And so the only thing I trust are my resources, my agency. And so I don't do processed foods. I do my best to like avoid it completely. And because we know, like I said before, this thing, the way processed foods are created, it basically drives addiction. And so I'm not unique to this. I have fallen victim to addiction to processed foods, and I've been able to extricate myself from that. And how was I able to do that? I teach all of that in my program, Conquer Your Cravings. A big part of that journey that is not in my program is water fasting. Okay, a big part of it, because first there's the awareness that this food is no good. Okay, and like for me personally, getting off bread was the first thing, then getting off cereal and getting off plantain chips and popcorn. Abstinence abstinence is the way to go. There's no like 80-20. I hear some nutritional psychiatrists out there talking about this, and honestly their bodies look inflamed. I don't like to look at people and judge them necessarily, but at the same time, like the message, I feel like messaging is so important, especially when you hold a position of power, of being a PhD researcher, doctor, you know what I'm saying? What you're telling the public to do to keep them healthy, and it matters a lot, because these white coats hold so much weight. It's like a psychological thing with people. Like they see the white coat and they're like, oh, you must be God. You know everything, right? And, you know, they have this weight with folks, and that's why I hold them responsible, because I saw how my grandmother was treated by the medical system, and I'm watching these people because I don't have trust based off of what I've seen with my own grandmother and what I see and hear, even in communities that I'm in. There are doctors that I do trust because they're well-versed on nutrition, food as medicine, lifestyle medicine, right? I'm a plant nutrition provider. I'm down with plant nutrition providers. Shout out to Plant Nutrition Project. I am a member of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. Like, I am down with using food as medicine, like looking at the source of what's going on instead of masking symptoms with pharmaceutical drugs that cause other side effects, and then those side effects have to be treated by other pharmaceutical drugs. That all of this stuff, you end up taking all these pills. Like my grandma was on like almost 20 pills, and you're taking pills for pills. Your kidneys eventually, of course, they're just going to be like, you know what, I'm done with you. And you cannot have quality of life without functioning kidneys. You know what I'm saying? So in any case, I overcame it. Abstinence is the key. Water fasting helped me out a lot, right? In the beginning, doing 24 hours of water fasting to just reset my gut microbiome, reset my palate, and then making a commitment to not purchase those things. So you have the physical aspect, which the water fasting takes care of, and then the psychological and emotional aspect, which does take time. That's what we deal with in my Conquer Your Cravings program. And so you can extricate yourself from this too. Knowing how bad these processed foods are, right? Hydrogenated oils, aspartame, natural flavoring, which has MSG in it, okay? Folks think that's not in the food supply. It for sure is in the food supply, MSG, because the labeling can even say that it's MSG free, and it still has MSG. And then you wonder, how do they get away with this? How do these companies get away with this? And that's the question you need to be asking your politicians. How is it that they get away with this? It's like the food industry and Congress. Apparently Congress is the vehicle to really create the change. It's like they're expecting everybody to be a chemist when they go grocery shopping. That would be, if chemists were going grocery shopping and putting on their chemist hat and picking items, then maybe you could say, oh, that's some kind of choice, right? But otherwise, there's no choice. You know what I'm saying? People are generally recognizing what's in the grocery store as safe. And it's not true. It is not true. You shouldn't have to be devoting your whole time like I do to read every book written by a doctor, chemist, scientist to find out the amount of death and destruction they have in the grocery store. It just boils my blood. But anyway, that's all I have for you today. As I bring my own blood pressure down, just do a whole audit of your kitchen. Get into raw food eating. If you go into raw foods and do that for a while, you will be more sensitive actually to some of this stuff. So when it shows up, your gut will be like, and because after a while, the body kind of creates a little bit of tolerance to toxicity, right? And then the toxic load gets to be so much that you only know something is bad until something goes really bad, something goes really wrong. You want to catch it before then. For me, I caught things because I apparently had blood sugar issues as a teen. I had a reputation around me as getting hangry. Make sure you feed Sam because she turns into a different person. That type of thing with my friends and family members. Like, it was a whole joke to everybody. And it's not until later when I actually learned about blood sugar regulation and metabolic health that I realized, oh, I had insulin resistance even then. I wasn't diagnosed with diabetes or nothing. I just had insulin resistance from trash food. And so that wasn't a sign. I had acid reflux that was triggered by an Advil that I took for menstrual pain. And this is before my vegan days. No one said, at that time, Advil was normal, Tums, Rolaids normal, and that stuff, I'm telling you, this stuff is so toxic. These antacids, they're doing more harm than anything. But that wasn't a red flag. But the red flag for me was because I ballooned. Actually, I went to do something healthy for myself. I found Dr. Neil Barnard's book on reversing type 2 diabetes. And I read that book and went vegan from that book. And I gained 20 pounds going vegan. And that was my red flag. My red flag was basically like, I'm doing a healthy thing for my body, yet I'm gaining weight. Why is that? And that's when I started to do some self-reflection. Oh, because you basically cut out meat, dairy, eggs, but you don't like vegetables, so you haven't been eating any vegetables. Maybe you should try eating some vegetables. And that's how I kind of got into raw foods. I was hearing all these people talk about, oh, you can eat all you want, which I love to overeat, okay? I love to overeat. You can eat all you want and lose weight. And would you believe, I sure did. I got down to 115. I dropped down to a size 4 jeans, which let me tell you, my pants and everything, that stuff is hard. Like I had never gotten lower than a size 6. A size 6 meant I was skinny mini doing well. But size 4, I was like, who is this person? I got down to 115. I had never been that low in my life. And it was just from going from cooked to raw. Not even 100% raw to get to 115. I still would have a little, there was a period of time of doing 100% raw, but I still had processed foods here and there. At one point, even having cereal, like healthy cereal, ancient grain or whatever with the cornchon, which I still have memories of this stuff tasting really good. I used to warm almond milk and eat it with the ancient grain because I had gotten to a place where even ancient grain, I didn't need it sweet. Like my almond milk didn't have any sweetener in it, and but the hot milk, that was like from my childhood. Growing up in a Jamaican family, you have a hot breakfast every morning, right? And so I used to have like cow milk, like dairy milk, and sometimes we had lactate too because apparently I was lactose intolerant, but I still had pizza and all the other stuff. So there was a little bit of cognitive dissonance going on in my family's household. But I would have the hot milk and Frosted Flakes, Honey Nut Cheerios, all that. And maybe because that was from my childhood, maybe it's the hot and the sweet, I don't know, but it just felt so comforting to me. And what in times of stress, that would be my go-to, like, feel comforting. I went to the healthier cereals. But then I got to a point where I realized this thing is not real food. And I just decided to cut it off because I'm like, this is not real food. But whatever it is that motivation is for you, whatever that flag is, sometimes it's not the obvious thing that people think it should be. Your kidneys are failing. Maybe it's something more, just something different. But whatever the motivation is, it has to come from within you. That's one of the pillars of coaching psychology, is that you are motivated to change when you have intrinsic motivation. It can't come from outside of you. You have to care about it enough to take action and want to do it, right? You need to have that internal motivation to change. If you're looking for support on your health and wellness journey to extricate yourself from these unhealthy food cravings, then definitely go to rawfoodmealplanner.com, book a call with me, and get to learn more about my Conquer Your Cravings program to see if it's the right fit for you and your needs. And if not, you at least walk away with a plan so you can move forward to help you achieve what it is you're looking for to reach your health goals. Have a nice day.